beautiful land where cold winds did not blow and snow never fell. These people were not obliged to work, and they had no enemies with whom to fight. Sickness and old age did not trouble them. Their lives were happy and tranquil. In the distant south were the Ethiopians, who were so happy and good that the gods often went to visit them. In the far-off west were the Fortunate Isles, or Islands of the Blessed, where everything was charming and where few people lived, beloved by the gods, lived forever without pain or sorrow. The Greeks thought there were many gods, most of whom lived above the clouds on top of Olympus, a mountain in Thessaly. They had bodies like men and women, but they were larger, stronger, and usually handsomer than human beings. The king of all the gods and the father of many of them was called Zeus. The Latin name for this god is Jupiter. He was the ruler of the weather. At his command, the clouds gathered, rain or snow fell, gentle winds blew, or storms roared. He darted lightning across the sky and hurled thunderbolts upon the world. The tallest trees and highest mountain peaks were sacred to him. He was also the god of justice, and sent his servants, the Furies, to punish men and women who did wrong. His wife is Hera, who in Latin is Juno. She was very lovely and stately. Her eyes were large and dark, so that one poet called her ox-eyed. She was proud and quarrelsome, and ready to harm those who made her angry. This couple had several children. One of them, Hephaestus, the Latin Vulcanus, is said by some to have been born lame. Others say that his father, in a fit of anger, threw him out of heaven. He fell for a long summer day, and when he reached the island of Lemos, he had little life remaining in him, and lived forever after. He was the blacksmith god, who built houses for the other gods, the arrows used by Apollo and Artemis, and other wonderful things. He was good-natured and fond of fun, but not foolish. Volcanoes were called his earthly workshops. His wife was Aphrodite, the Latin Venus, the loveliest of all the goddesses, who was said to have been born from the foam of the sea. She was the ruler of love and beauty. Wherever she went, soft and gentle breezes followed her, and flowers sprang up where her feet touched. She made some people happy, but for others she caused much grief and trouble. One day, Zeus had a terrible headache. Hephaestus, with an axe, split open his father's aching head. The goddess Athena, the Latin Minerva, and swift, the messenger of the gods. Under his care were merchants, travelers, and public speakers. He wore a low-crowned hat with wings, and wings grew from his ankles. In his hand, he carried a wand around which snakes twined. He was very cunning and full of tricks. Ares, the Latin Mars, was the god of war, finding pleasure in battle and death. Hestia, the Latin Vesta, was the sister of Zeus. She was the goddess of the fireside and watched over the homes of men. She never married, but Zeus gave her a seat in the center of his palace and sent her the sweetest morsels at every feast. On earth, she was worshipped as the oldest and best of the gods. In her temple, a sacred fire was forever burning, watched by unmarried women who were called the Vestal Virgins. These 10 gods formed the great council of Olympus. They lived in their own houses of brass, built by Hephaestus. But every day they went to the palace of Zeus and feasted on ambrosia and nectar. Hebe, the beautiful daughter of Zeus and Hera, waited upon the table. After her marriage to Heracles, her place was taken by Ganymede, a beautiful Trojan boy, whom Zeus in the form of an eagle carried away to heaven. At the feasts, Apollo played on his lyre, and the muses sang. The muses were 9 sisters who lived on Mount Parnassus. They had charge of poetry, history, music, tragedy, comedy, dancing, love songs, hymns, and astronomy. The ruler of the sea was Poseidon, whose Latin name was Neptune. Under the waves he had a shining palace, receive some special gift, there was nothing for him. Though he was noblest of all creatures, he was really weakest and most helpless of all. The two Titan brothers stood and looked at each other. "What shall we do now?" said Prometheus. "Everything has been given out." "Is nothing left?" said Prometheus. "Nothing at all," answered his brother. They looked around, but no help came. Then they looked up at the shining sun. "Oh, I know," said Prometheus. "Stay here and wait for me." "Where are you going?" asked his brother. "You will know when I come back," answered Prometheus. Then he went to the highest mountain and climbed to its top. There, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, met him and helped him the rest of the way up to the sky. On the mountain top, he had broken a branch from a pine tree. This he took with him, and as the sun came driving by in his chariot of fire, Prometheus touched the branch to the burning wheels. The green leaves snapped and crackled in the flame. The pitchy wood took fire. Prometheus hurried back from the sky and ran down the mountain. All the way he took care to keep the branch burning. When he reached Prometheus, he said, "Hurry and get a pile of branches. Here is a fire from heaven. This shall be our one best gift to man. By this ye shall conquer all the other creatures and be master of earth and sea and air." Prometheus ran and gathered branches and piled them in a heap. Prometheus threw his torch among them. The twigs caught fire at once, and soon there was a bright, roaring, cheerful, comfortable blaze. Then the brothers called the man and said, "Come here and be warm." For the night was falling and the air was growing chilly. The man stretched out his hands toward the fire and laughed. "This is not a plaything," said the Titans. "You must keep it as your servant and be very careful that you never let it become your master. Use it rightly, and it will make you ruler over everything in the world." So the man was glad and kept the fire burning. When the winter came, he did not have to travel south like the birds or go to sleep in a hollow tree like the bears. He made a fire in his hut and was comfortable there. Soon he learned to cook his food instead of eating it raw. He found stones which would melt and which we call ores: lead, tin, zinc, copper, silver, and gold. He melted gold and silver and with stone hammers pounded out rings and bracelets and earrings, which he wore. He melted copper and answered, "Yes, great father, we see him." "He is lonely," said Zeus. "Let us give him a companion. He is man, and I will form a woman to be with him, and each of you shall give her something that shall be a part of her life." The gods and goddesses were pleased. Zeus created the woman, but she had yet no life. Aphrodite bent down and kissed her on her cheeks and lips. A lovely flush appeared on her face. Her mouth became rosy and smiling. She had received the gift of beauty. Athena drew near and gently laid her hand upon the woman's brow. "My gift is wisdom," she said. "This woman shall be wise to spin, to weave, to do all manner of housework, and to train up children in goodness." The shining god Apollo came up and touched her lips and fingers. "I give her the power of music," he declared. "She shall be able to sing sweet songs of love and home and hope and heaven. From reeds and strings she shall be able to draw pleasant sounds to cheer man when he is tired and to comfort him when he is sad." Then Ares, the god of war, looked at her and said, "She will not be a fighter herself, but she shall be the cause of many wars. That is my gift. I have no other." Hephaestus, the blacksmith, limped up and said, "I will put iron in her blood that will make her strong to bear trouble and endure hardship. Smaller and finer than man, she shall be more patient and steadfast than he." Eros brought for his gift a warm and tender heart. "She is lovely and shall be loving," he said. Last of all came Hermes, the swift-running god. His eyes twinkled as he touched her ears, her eyes, and her nose. "My gift is curiosity, to see everything, to hear everything, and to know everything. That shall be her wish," he said. Then he touched her tongue, but did not say anything more. Zeus stretched forth his golden scepter and laid it lightly upon her head. "Arise, woman," he exclaimed. She arose and stood upon her feet. "The gods have given you their gifts," he declared. "Your name shall be Pandora, which means all gifts." "Hermes," he called, "take this woman down to earth and give her to man, to be his companion for better and for worse, for sorrow and for joy. Take with you also this box, her wedding present, which must never be opened. Go, perform your duty." Hermes took Pandora by hand, and soon they were on the earth. They entered the man's hut, and Hermes said, "This is your wife, sent to you by Zeus. Her name is Pandora. Here is your wedding present, this box, which must never be opened. Farewell." The man was very happy with his new companion. She was beautiful, kind, gentle, and cheerful. He showed her his knives and hammers, axes and saws, his bow and spear, arrows and fishhooks, his plow and hoe, and everything that he had made of bronze. She told him how to make a distaff and spindle for spinning, and how to build a loom for weaving. She asked him to make hairpins for her hair, and needles to sew with, and knitting needles that she might knit stockings and caps. When the man went out to work, she stayed in the house. In one corner of the room, room stood the magic box, her wedding present. If she was spinning or weaving or sewing or knitting, she was always looking at that. It was of ivory, beautifully carved. She often said, "I do wonder what it holds. It is so handsome outside that the inside must be very lovely." Sometimes she laid down her work and went to the box. She looked at it with her eyes, listened at it with her ears, sniffed at it with her nose, but she could never be sure there was any sound or any odor. She began to be worried. The gift of Hermes was giving her a great deal of trouble. Often at night, she would wake up and say to her husband, "I do wonder what is in the box." He would answer, "It is not to be opened. Go to sleep. I am tired." But she could not rest day or night. Always she wondered what was in that strange box. Why was it given if it must never be opened? At last she could bear it no longer. She lifted the lid just a little. There was a stir and rush in the box. The lid was thrown wide open, and out flew a multitude of things with wings. They seemed like wasps and hornets and stinging insects, but they were worse. They were trouble, sorrow, sickness, distress, pain, anger, envy, hatred, malice, falsehood, everything ugly and dreadful. Pandora clapped down the lid, but it was too late. These creatures buzzed in her ears, settled in her hair, filled the hut and flew out of the window, all over the world. Pandora sank down, crying as if her heart